Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Today was Monday Pro Max. There's just way too much happening in our world. The Prime Minister of Bangladesh has been ousted from power and she has fled the country. The pictures are very dramatic and the consequences, I'm afraid, will be even more so. We'll talk about how this happened and what it means for Sheikh Hasina, for Bangladesh and for India. In West Asia, Israel is waiting for an attack from Iran that will most likely come today. Basically, more war. And the markets have all gone south. Mass sell-off across the board. Stocks, oil, crypto, everything fell today. We'll tell you why. In the UK, anti-Muslim riots are spreading. In Nigeria, anti-government protests continue. It's like the world cannot catch a breath. So we decided to look for some Monday motivation too, and we found it in Paris. The city of love and Olympic controversies has seen a new record. The first Olympic medal for the refugee team. These are displaced players who represent no country, who overcome adversity to win. It's a must-watch. Also, our new segment, Joke of the Day, where we tell you what the internet is laughing about in an otherwise tough world. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. North Korea deploys 250 ballistic missile launchers to its southern border. This is the first time that Pyongyang has publicized the scale of an arms transfer. In recent months, North Korea has also ramped up its weapons testing. Relations between the two Koreas are at one of their lowest points in years. India to host the first BIMTECH business summit. The three-day meet begins tomorrow in the national capital. The aim is to foster regional collaboration through trade and investments. BIMTECH, or the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, has 7 members. Mali breaks off diplomatic relations with Ukraine, claims Kiev played a role in the defeat of Malian troops in July. Members of Russia's Wagner Group were also among the casualties. The move comes as Moscow reaffirmed its support for Bamako. In 2020, the military seized power in the West African nation in a coup. TikTok bows to the European Union and withdraws its rewards program. The feature on TikTok Lite rewards users for watching and liking videos. The EU said it could have addictive consequences. In April, TikTok Lite was unveiled in France and Spain. They're the only EU countries where it is available. And Germany wins gold in the mixed relay triathlon at the Paris Olympics. The controversial event was marred by illnesses. Last week, participants from at least 3 countries fell sick after swimming in the Seine. Belgium withdrew from the race after their athlete fell sick, reportedly with E. coli. It's been a very dramatic day for Bangladesh, and that's putting it mildly. Their Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been ousted from power. The army has taken over the country. Protesters stormed the Prime Minister's official residence. They have taken over the capital, Dhaka. Hasina has had to flee her own country, a country that her father helped liberate from Pakistan, a country that she helped build. Earlier today, she landed in India, in the northeastern Indian state of Tripura. Sheikh Hasina came with her sister. Then a few hours back, they arrived at an airport near New Delhi. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has met Hasina there. You'd appreciate that this is an evolving situation, so there are new developments every minute. Hasina's plan is not clear at the moment. She is said to have applied for asylum in the UK. Until then, she might stay in India. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, this is how the news of her exit was celebrated. What a turn of events. Not many would have seen this coming. Not very long ago, the same Sheikh Hasina was shuttling from New Delhi to Beijing, shaking hands and negotiating deals. The Bangladeshi Prime Minister appeared to be in complete control of her affairs, but all of it unraveled in the last few weeks. There was a student protest against job quotas. It morphed into a mass uprising and led to the collapse of her government. There's a lot to unpack here, and I think the best place to start with is today. Let's first tell you how the day unfolded. At around 10 a.m. today, 10 o'clock Monday morning local time, protesters started gathering on the streets. They'd planned a long march to Dhaka. And this was after yesterday's violence. The weekend was bloody. Bangladesh saw violent clashes over the weekend between members of Sheikh Hasina's party, that is the Awami League, and the protesters. They clashed. Some 100 people were killed over the last 2 days. You can imagine how bad it was. The army imposed a curfew. Security forces were deployed in large numbers, including the police and the military. They were all patrolling the streets, trying to enforce the curfew. But the protesters remained defiant and returned to demonstrate today.
Nobody can stop us from marching today. If we turn back and face them, once we will liberate Bangladesh. And I want to tell my armed forces brothers not to align with the autocrat. Either you be with the people or stay neutral.
The turnout was massive. At around 11:30 a.m. local time in Dhaka, the police tried to break up the protest. They fired tear gas shells and sound grenades. It did not help though. The crowd did not leave. Almost 30 minutes later at noon, the internet was shut down. This move was ordered by the government. The internet shut down. Your WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, all gone. Yesterday, curbs were placed on mobile internet in the country. This was done by the army. So there was no 4G connectivity on phones. Despite all of this, the protesters managed to get the word out and mobilize in large numbers. At around 1 p.m., there was fresh violence. Clashes erupted between protesters and members of the Chhatra League. That's the student wing of Sheikh Hasina's party, the Awami League. They clashed with the protesters. Today, they appeared weak and outmatched, though, because there were more protesters on the streets. People from all walks of life are said to have joined the student protest. Together, they occupied highways, and then the crowd started marching towards the capital, Dhaka. The police tried to stop them again. They opened fire. At least 6 protesters were killed. But the crowd was simply too big for the security officials to deal with. About an hour later, at 2 p.m., we started getting unconfirmed reports. They said Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had left Dhaka. And this triggered speculation about her resignation. 30 minutes later, we received the first pictures. Hasina was seen taking off in a helicopter from Dhaka. Meanwhile, back in the capital, protesters had stormed her official residence. They caused a lot of damage. Even the statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was not spared. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was Sheikh Hasina's father. He was also the founding father of Bangladesh. Today, protesters vandalized his statue. By 3 p.m., the picture was clear. Hasina had been ousted. The Bangladesh Army chief made a rare appearance on television. That's General Wakar-uz-Rahman. He confirmed the Prime Minister's exit. He said that the army, along with other political parties, will form a government. The general said he'd met with all political parties, including the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the Jatiya Party and the Jamaat-e-Islami. Hours later, the military named an interim government, mostly made up of retired generals and former judges. 2 noted Bangla writers could lead this government, Dr. Salimullah Khan and Dr. Asif Nazrul. There is no one from the Awami League. Sheikh Hasina's party has been completely removed from positions of power. In a statement, the army chief tried to reassure the protesters too. He said their demands will be met.
The Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh has resigned from her post, and we will form an interim government for now to run the country. Please keep faith and trust in the army. I take the responsibility and I promise to protect the lives and property of the people. Don't lose faith in the army.
Soon after that announcement, celebrations broke out. Protesters were seen taking off Hasina's portraits from walls. Inside the Prime Minister's residence, there was complete pandemonium. Protesters were seen taking selfies inside bedrooms. Some of them removed the furniture, the bedding, the clothes, even the crockery. Some were seen floating around in a boat. Others were helping themselves to a buffet. If you think you've seen this before, you're not wrong. Scenes like these played out in Sri Lanka 2 years ago when the Rajapaksas were ousted. A mass uprising demolished their political legacy. Now it's happening to Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. At this point, we usually ask a question. What does all of this mean for India? Then we lay out the positives and the negatives. Not this time, though, because there are no positives here. This is a major setback for New Delhi. Sheikh Hasina wasn't just an ally, she was the foundation of India's entire Bangladesh policy. So her exit is a big deal. The question is, how will India navigate this? Well, there are 3 factors to consider here. 1, possible spillovers. 2, public goodwill. And 3, geopolitical realignment. Let's go one by one. India and Bangladesh have a long border. It's more than 4,000 kilometers long. Almost half of it is with northeast India, a region that has been troubled by insurgency. Now, Sheikh Hasina helped India with that. She did not tolerate these anti-India insurgents. But with her gone, who knows? The next regime may not be so accommodating. Another problem is refugees. Most of Bangladesh is Muslim, but nearly 10% of the population is made up of minorities like Hindus and Christians. They make up almost 17 million people. And what happens to them? Bangladesh's army and the opposition have radical Islamist tendencies. They have a history of targeting minorities. Sheikh Hasina kept them in check. But with her gone, will they revert to default? If they do, India will be under pressure, maybe to lobby on behalf of these minorities or even host some of them. New Delhi is preparing for such spillovers. The Border Security Force has sounded an alert. The government has also issued an advisory. Indian citizens have been asked to not travel to Bangladesh. Those already there have been asked to be careful and not move around. Which brings us to the second factor, public goodwill. Indian soldiers fought for Bangladesh's independence. This relationship was forged on the battlefield. So goodwill was never an issue. But recently, that appears to have changed. India was seen as propping up Sheikh Hasina's government. We saw reports of election rigging, crackdowns on the opposition, human rights violations. But New Delhi never criticized any of it. India called it an internal issue for Dhaka. Perhaps that rubbed people the wrong way. Plus, there is a generational change happening. You see, the average age of Bangladesh is 27 years. The liberation war happened more than 50 years ago. So young Bangladeshis see India differently. As a liberator, yes, but also as a big brother. And we saw evidence of that earlier this year. Anti-Hasina protesters started a boycott India movement. They told Bangladeshis, don't buy Indian products. In hindsight, maybe that was a warning sign that protesters see Hasina and India as synonymous. In fact, one video sums it up best. Protesters climbing up a statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He's Sheikh Hasina's father, the founder of Bangladesh, and a great friend of India's. Look at what they did to his statue. That is the new Bangladesh. So New Delhi has a long project ahead. It must repair its image and regain the goodwill. Now to the last factor, and that is geopolitics. A lot depends on the dynamics in Dhaka. The army is setting up an interim government. But those are two things that never go well together, army and interim government, especially in Bangladesh. The country was under military rule from 1975 to 1991. Even now, the army there is quite powerful. So will they give up this power or will they cling on? That's the first worry for India. But let's assume that the army will step down. Naturally, new elections will have to be held. Chances are the opposition will win. That's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and the Jamaat-e-Islami. This is the opposition. Both parties are bad news for India. Look at the BNP's record, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Look at their record. In 1972, India and Bangladesh signed a friendship treaty. The BNP later called it a treaty of slavery. In 1996, the Ganges Water Sharing Treaty was signed. Again, the BNP called it slavery. In 2013, then Indian President Pranab Mukherjee was in Dhaka. He was slated to meet BNP leader Khalida Zia, but Zia cancelled the meeting. Even the recent boycott campaign was backed by the BNP. So what happens if this party comes to power? India could face constant pushback, whether it's signing new deals or settling river disputes or containing China's influence. All of it will be a challenge. New Delhi may have to deal with an unhelpful regime in Dhaka. It's becoming a trend in this part of the world. Afghanistan used to have a pro-India government. Now it is ruled by the Taliban. The Maldives also had a pro-India government. Their new president says India out. In Nepal, the new Prime Minister is KP Sharma Oli, a leader who stirred up a border dispute with India. And of course, Pakistan was never helpful. So Bangladesh was the last regime standing, India's only reliable neighbor, you could say. Sheikh Hasina's exit will require a diplomatic reset. We told you that Prime Minister Modi must focus on the neighborhood in his third term. Well, now he doesn't have any other option. There's another factor that we haven't discussed, and that is Pakistan. They have a role to play here. Before 1971, you see, there was no Bangladesh. You had East Pakistan and West Pakistan. The East Wing broke away to become the country of Bangladesh. So relations are frayed between Bangladesh and Pakistan. Sheikh Hasina was completely anti-Pakistan, and she had good reason to be. Pakistan's army jailed her father. They also slaughtered thousands of Bangladeshis, and the feeling was mutual. Pakistan's military was no fan of Hasina. They've criticized her on multiple occasions, especially on the 1971 war. But could they have plotted her ouster? Could Pakistan have done it? Well, Sheikh Hasina's party says yes. It has blamed two groups for the violent protests. One is Pakistan, the other is the United States. We get Pakistan. But why the US? Because Washington has been critical of Sheikh Hasina. They questioned her recent re-election. They said it wasn't free or fair. Now, just to be clear, this wasn't about ideology or strategy. Joe Biden saw a convenient target in Bangladesh, a training ground for a so-called democratic experiment. So he gave Pakistan a free pass, but he went hard against Sheikh Hasina. Again, the sentiment was mutual. Sheikh Hasina accused the United States of plotting a regime change in Dhaka, of trying to topple her. But are either of these claims true? Well, the US is no stranger to regime changes. In Pakistan, Imran Khan accused them of toppling his government. So are they capable of it? Yes, very much. But did they do it? Well, evidence is a bit sketchy, but we say worth looking at. Look at this report. It analyzes BNP social media posts against Sheikh Hasina. Apparently, most of these accounts were based in the US. Hasina's supporters say this is evidence of meddling. But it's hardly a smoking gun because many opposition leaders live in exile. Hasina herself is heading to the UK. So the whole US meddling angle has to be proven, and it won't be easy. But the Pakistan bit is even more complicated. Let's look at the two main opposition groups in Bangladesh again. The first is the Jamaat-e-Islami. It's an Islamist group formed before partition. The Jamaat opposed Bangladesh's liberation in 1971. They wanted to retain Muslim unity. To this end, they even collaborated with Pakistan's army. Basically, they wanted to prevent the creation of Bangladesh. So how did such a party survive? Well, at first it did not. Many Jamaat leaders were jailed for war crimes. The group struggled to remain relevant. But by the late 1970s, they started turning it around. How? By focusing on religion. You see, Bangladesh was founded on secular lines, but the Jamaat sought to radicalize the people. They emphasized on Muslim identity. So for them, Pakistan was not an enemy. It was a fellow Muslim country. Same with the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP. It was founded by military ruler Ziaur Rahman. He removed secularism from Bangladesh's constitution. Instead, he emphasized on Islamic identity. Some BNP leaders have also been accused of war crimes. Today, the BNP and Jamaat are allies. So the broad takeaway is this. Both these parties are soft on Pakistan. Reports say they have ties to Pakistan's deep state. Look at this report from 2012. The BNP was accused of taking money from the ISI, that's the Inter-Services Intelligence, Pakistan's spy agency and Dirty Works Department. They've also been accused of plotting terror attacks, most notably the Dhaka cafe blast of 2016. So could they have plotted Hasina's ouster? Her supporters say yes. They accuse Pakistan's mission in Dhaka of meddling, of encouraging violent protests. But again, there is no evidence. We cannot definitively say that Pakistan or the US was involved. But here's what we can say. One, Pakistan would welcome this regime change. We haven't heard from Islamabad yet, but rest assured, the generals are celebrating. And two, the US policy did not help. Sheikh Hasina may have had her problems, but she delivered growth and stability. She kept the radical Islamists at bay. But that wasn't enough for Joe Biden. He gave free passes to the likes of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, but he ramped up the pressure on Dhaka. I'm sure that did not help. Of course, these are all additional factors. The main driver was the people, and that's the message from Bangladesh today. Power flows from the people. They give you power, they can also take it away. In 1981, Bangladesh's streets are full of people. They were waiting for Sheikh Hasina. She was returning to the country. It was her first visit since her father's assassination. Crowds lined the streets. They followed her from the airport to her home. They celebrated her homecoming. Today, 43 years later, thousands lined the streets of Bangladesh again, but this time the reason was very different. They were celebrating Sheikh Hasina's exit from the country. How did it come to this? How did Sheikh Hasina go from being a democratic icon to Bangladesh's ousted prime minister? It's a fascinating story, one that should be told today. Sheikh Hasina once said that democracy is in her DNA. When she returned to Bangladesh, she joined hands with other political parties. She led marches. She held pro-democracy protests. She mobilized the people of her country. In 1990, Bangladesh's military leader was toppled from power. By then, Sheikh Hasina was a national icon. In 1996, she was elected as Prime Minister, but 5 years later, she lost power to Khalida Zia, her chief opponent and the leader of Bangladesh Nationalist Party. What followed was a decade-long power struggle, and it impacted Bangladesh in many ways. There was political unrest, social unrest, and military interventions. It was also a period of turmoil for Hasina. She endured multiple arrests. She survived assassination attempts. She battled corruption charges. But things took a turn in the year 2008. 2008, that's when elections were held again. Hasina secured a landslide victory. By 2009, she was back in power, and she remained there until this morning in power. This was her longest stint as Prime Minister. It lasted for 15 years, and her legacy is a mixed bag. Let's look at the positives first. Obviously, on top of the list is economic progress. Bangladesh is a shining example. In 2007, their GDP was $71 billion. By 2022, it was $460 billion. Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Annual GDP growth has been more than 7%. In the last decade, per capita income has tripled. 25 million people were lifted out of poverty. Bangladesh forayed into high-tech manufacturing. Hasina also unveiled some mega infrastructure projects, including the flagship Padma Bridge. Those are not mean achievements. Her second big win is this: a reign of stability. That's what she achieved. Hasina knew what political turmoil looked like. She'd spent half of her life as a political survivor, so maintaining order was a top priority for her. And she did achieve it. She cracked down on extremists. She steered her country away from trouble. Sheikh Hasina is the world's longest-serving female head of state. You cannot deny Bangladesh's rise on her watch. But you can question her methods to achieve this growth. And that brings us to the negatives. What did she do wrong? Well, Hasina ruled Bangladesh with an iron grip. The opposition was under arrest. Parties were disqualified from contesting elections. Dissent was not tolerated. Institutions were captured. Media was controlled. Her rule took an authoritarian turn, and it became stark in the elections in January this year. Sheikh Hasina won, but she also had no competition. The opposition had boycotted the election. And that brings us to problem number 2, the same economy. Bangladesh's economic growth was fueled by one industry, and that is the garment sector. It took a hit during the pandemic. Then inflation skyrocketed. By November last year, it was close to 9.5%, the highest in decades. Foreign debt doubled, foreign exchange reserves dropped. This economic turmoil also led to anti-government sentiment. People blamed Hasina for all of it. Those cries became louder this summer. Dhaka plunged into turmoil over a job quota system because 56% of government jobs in the country were reserved. 56%. So thousands of people took to the streets, mostly students, protesting against this reservation. The Prime Minister called them traitors and terrorists. The protest spread. Last month, Bangladesh's top court scrapped the quota, most of it. So reservation was out. But the protest did not end, because it was no longer about the quotas now. It was about Sheikh Hasina and her government, and the way Hasina responded made it even worse. She remained defiant. She refused to engage and cracked down hard. Hundreds of people died. Many more were arrested. So then what happened today? How did she go from rigidity to resignation? What is it that tipped the scales today? The protest this weekend. That is what made the difference. It was the bloodiest in the country's history, especially yesterday. There were clashes between the police and the protesters. Close to 100 people were killed in a single day. Dhaka announced a nationwide curfew, but within hours, the people were back on the streets. They did not fear bullets anymore, and the military turned against the Prime Minister. They did not want to hold off civilians anymore. This left Sheikh Hasina with no choice, really. She could either flee and save herself or incur the wrath of her people. We all know what she chose, but it's hard to believe that she did not see it coming. In 1990, a student-led uprising ended military rule in Bangladesh, and Hasina was at the forefront of it. That's how she came to power. 3 decades later, Hasina is out of power, courtesy the students again. Which brings us to South Asia. In 2022, Sri Lanka witnessed a similar situation. Angry protesters stormed the presidential palace. The president had to flee. The government fell. It's like we're watching that on repeat again in Bangladesh. And South Asia, we could say, is no stranger to such protests. In Sri Lanka, it was over the economy. In Bangladesh, it's about Sheikh Hasina's iron rule. In Pakistan, it was against Imran Khan's arrest. In Nepal, it was against democracy altogether. In some countries, like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, it brought change. In others, it was only symbolic. But while the reasons may be different, it's a lesson for governments. You can never ignore the will of the people. Our next report tells you more.
It was called Aragalaya, or in other words, the people's struggle. It was a months-long struggle, but it ended with a cool dip in the swimming pool of the presidential palace. Sri Lanka's economy has long struggled, but things got worse in 2019. Then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa slashed taxes. It deprived the country of a much-needed source of income. Then came a global pandemic. Income from tourism dried up. Remittances fell and debt grew. By 2022, inflation was at 55%. Food was becoming unaffordable. Fuel was in short supply. On top of that, there were rolling blackouts. It was the country's worst economic crisis since independence. The people were angry, so they took to the streets. They blamed the government of economic mismanagement. What started off as small demonstrations soon engulfed the entire country. Protests continued day and night. The rallying cry was "Gota, go home." It was aimed against President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. This continued for some time, but soon the protesters had had enough. The government wasn't doing anything and the anger was boiling over. It resulted in this. Protesters stormed the presidential palace. People took selfies, broke the furniture, lounged on a 4-poster bed, and even enjoyed the swimming pool. Soon, Rajapaksa was forced out of power. He had to flee the country, and 5 days later, he resigned. It was a win for the people. They wanted the Rajapaksas out, and it finally happened. Not very far away from Sri Lanka, a different story was playing out. In 2023, Pakistan witnessed similar scenes, people out on the streets protesting. But this wasn't against a leader, it was for a leader, for ousted Prime Minister Imran Khan. After he was arrested, the country plunged into violence. There were riots, vandalism, clashes with police, even attacks on military establishments. Unlike Sri Lanka, nothing changed. The army still runs the nation and Imran Khan is still in jail. Elsewhere in the region, the anger wasn't against just one leader, it was against the whole democratic system. In April this year, Nepal's citizens took to the streets. Why? Because they wanted the monarchy back. And it's because of the country's political crisis, where government was reduced to playing musical chairs. In the last 16 years, Nepal has seen 14 governments. That's a different government almost every year. So the protesters had had enough. They wanted the king back. 3 different countries, 3 very different protests, but one clear message. People's anger is often unstoppable, even in the face of brute force. In Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, it worked out in favour of the people. Not so much in Pakistan and Nepal. But it's a lesson for governments across the region.
Let's talk about the other big story today, the meltdown in global markets from Japan to India and the United States. All major markets were in the red today. Investors worldwide have lost billions, including those in India. Going by one claim, 17 lakh crores were wiped off from the Indian markets today. That's more than $20 billion gone in a day. It was a bloodbath. For months, Indian markets have been on a high. Investors have witnessed a record-breaking bull run. The Nifty alone hit record highs more than 45 times this year. The Nifty is an index of India's top 50 companies. Its boom was thanks to big bets by investors. They were sold on India's growth story. So have they lost confidence now? What caused the sell-off today? Well, broadly, there are 3 reasons. Number 1, recession fears in the US. They've returned. We told you about this last week, about how rising unemployment claims and a slowdown in the manufacturing sector have raised fears of an American recession. The US has released its latest unemployment data, and here's what it says. 4.3% of all Americans are unemployed. This is close to a 3-year high. In April last year, unemployment was a little more than 3%. So the US is witnessing an increase in joblessness. And this is making American banks nervous, banks like Goldman Sachs. They say that there's a higher probability of recession in the US. Earlier, they'd said that there was a 15% chance of recession in 2025. Now they say there's a 25% chance of recession. So that's one reason for the investor panic, the state of jobs and its potential impact on the economy. Reason number 2 is the situation in West Asia. It's going from bad to worse. There is fear of a wider regional conflict. Iran and its proxies could target Israel this week. In fact, they could launch an attack in the next 24 hours.
The Islamic Republic of Iran will definitely take serious and deterrent action with strength, determination, and firmness in ensuring its security and punishing the aggressor. Iran cannot be indifferent towards its security, its friends' and allies' security, and the security of the region.
Both the Hezbollah and Iran want revenge. Hezbollah for the death of one of their top commanders. He was taken out by an Israeli airstrike. And Iran wants to hit back at Israel for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas. Both attacks happened on the same day last month. Now, reports say Iran and its proxies want to respond to strike targets deep inside Israel. If that happens, Netanyahu has vowed to hit back. So you know where this is going. And it's making the stock markets even more nervous. Reason number 3 is India Inc. and the tepid first quarter results. So far, 30 out of India's top 50 companies have reported their numbers and their business is growing by just about 0.7%. This is on a year-on-year basis. And what about profits? They've declined by almost 10% quarter on quarter. So a mix of external and internal factors led to today's mass sell-off. And it's not just the stock markets. The Indian rupee is feeling the pressure too. It touched an all-time low against the US dollar. $1 was trading at almost 84 rupees. And like I said at the beginning, this is not limited to India. Other parts of the global economy are also facing headwinds, like the oil markets. The price of Brent crude is down. Global prices are close to an 8-month low. Even cryptocurrencies are in free fall. In the last 24 hours, there has been a sell-off. Crypto assets worth over $1 billion were liquidated. So overall, the sentiment is negative. And will it lead to long-term pain? Honestly, it's hard to say at the moment. There's volatility in more ways than one, so we'll have to wait to see what shape this takes. Now let's focus on Iran. The whole world is watching it, waiting for its next move. A move that everyone is certain is coming, perhaps as soon as today. At least that's what the US believes. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has reportedly sent a warning to the G7 or Group of 7 nations. He told them that an attack could take place as soon as Monday. And he wanted them to apply diplomatic pressure on Iran to minimize their retaliation. But will that really work? Last week, Iran was humiliated. Ismail Haniyeh, the chief of Hamas, was assassinated on Iranian soil. He was killed in the capital, Tehran, just hours after attending the inauguration ceremony of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. It was a slap in the face for the Iranian regime. Their honored guest was killed just hours after hugging their new president and Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Tehran blames Israel for this assassination. Israel has not accepted or rejected the accusation, but that doesn't really matter to Iran now. It doesn't plan to leave that insult unanswered.
Israel targeted the revolutionary leader of a freedom-fighting movement who was after the right to his people's destiny and his occupied lands in another country. They think by doing this, they have reached some success that helps them survive. They are digging their own grave, and they will gradually get themselves buried in these swamps and holes.
That was General Hossein Salami, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. He issued that threat today. Salami is the latest Iranian leader to threaten Israel, and his word carries weight. The Revolutionary Guards are Iran's special forces, and they also exercise some control over Iran's proxies, groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Any attack on Israel will likely involve all these factions. So Iran's Revolutionary Guard will be at the forefront of the battle, and the head of the guard seems to be spoiling for a fight. Tehran is also flexing its muscle. It has issued a warning to aviation authorities. It has warned pilots to avoid its airspace, which indicates that an attack is imminent. But will there really be an all-out war? Perhaps not. Listen to this.
Iran does not seek to escalate tensions in the region. If Iran talks about its right to punish the aggressor, this is an action to help consolidate security and stability in the region.
Iran says it has the right to punish Israel, but it also says it doesn't want to escalate tensions in the region. That's a tough balancing act. Iran will have to retaliate in a way that doesn't invite more attacks from Israel or its biggest backer, the United States. I mentioned earlier that the US is looking for a diplomatic intervention, but that is not all. The US is also preparing for the worst-case scenario. President Joe Biden is meeting his national security team today. The US has already deployed more assets to West Asia. The USS Abraham Lincoln is on its way to the region, along with another squadron of fighter planes. So the stakes are high. Iran cannot afford to look weak, so it has to respond. But if it goes overboard, it may end up in a war it cannot handle. And Tehran is aware of this, so it seems to be taking precautions by asking an old friend for help. That's Russia. Sergei Shoigu landed in Tehran today. He's currently the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, but before this, he was Russia's defense minister, and he oversaw Russia's invasion of Ukraine for more than 2 years. The same Shoigu is currently in Tehran. He's meeting Iran's President Pezeshkian. He will also meet other senior officials. The visit is symbolic. It shows that Iran has powerful friends too. So that's the situation at the moment. All the pieces seem to be in place. Both sides are preparing for the next move. The only question is, how soon will Iran attack? In West Africa, Nigeria remains in the grip of deadly protests. Since the 1st of August, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets against what they call bad governance and the soaring cost of living. So far, about a dozen people have died. On Saturday, protests turned more hostile and the security crackdown intensified. So on Sunday, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu finally spoke up. He said that he understands the people's pain and frustration, and he urged Nigerians to end the protest. But will they? Our next report tells you.
Day 5. Nigeria remains on edge, as the West African nation is only halfway through the designated 10 days of rage. The protest began on August 1st against bad governance and the soaring cost of living in Africa's most populous nation. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across the nation, including in the capital Abuja and Lagos, the country's commercial hub. Since the protest began, 700 people have been arrested nationwide, including at least 50 journalists, according to Amnesty International, and at least 13 people have been killed, according to the same source. But the police have put the death toll at 7. They're not taking responsibility for the deaths. Instead, they are blaming accidents and the quote-unquote hoodlums for the violence. Over the weekend, as anger spiked, the protest became more hostile, and the crackdown by authorities intensified. So finally, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu spoke up. He addressed the nation on Sunday.
My dear Nigerians, especially our youths, I have heard you loud and clear. I understand the pain and the frustration that drive this protest, and I want to assure you that our government is committed to listening and addressing the concerns of our citizens. But we must not let violence and destruction tear our nation apart.
Tinubu also urged Nigerians to end the protest.
Suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue, which I have always acceded to at the slightest opportunity. Nigeria requires all hands on deck and need us all, regardless of age, party, tribe, religion, or other divides.
But then he went on to defend his economic reforms, which are at the core of the protests. The president came to office in May 2023. Since then, he has devalued the Nigerian currency, the naira. He has ended fuel and electricity subsidies. And now, Nigeria is suffering its worst economic crisis in decades. The inflation has hit a 28-year high. Sure, this didn't happen in a bubble. Nigeria has seen years of economic mismanagement. But Tinubu placed the cherry on top, and Nigerians blame him for their hardships. So, an apology sandwich with consolations and sorries is not cutting it for them.
We are going nowhere. What the president said this morning means nothing. It means nothing.
From the speech that the president has made so far, if he doesn't address the needs of the Nigerian people by reducing the fuel price back to 200, bringing back subsidy, reducing the cost of education, opening the borders, then he has not spoken.
So this is where Nigeria is at, bubbling with anger, only to be snubbed by police action, and the president's call for a protest pause. Which side will win? The answer should become clear this week. But if early indications hold any weight, brute force and empty words will not do much to assuage the anger of young Nigerians.
Now let's turn to the UK, which is also seeing massive unrest. Riots have broken out in all corners of the country: Belfast in Northern Ireland, Liverpool in Merseyside, Sunderland in northeast England, Bristol in the southwest. Riots have broken out in all these places. Mobs have been setting cars and buildings ablaze. They've been attacking the police and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Take a look. Britain's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer has a crisis on his hands. He held a so-called Cobra meeting today. Cobra short for Cabinet Office Briefing Room A meeting. Now, this is when ministers, civil servants, police and intelligence officials gather during an emergency and they try and find a way to respond. His goal is simple: find the rioters and punish them.
People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is: far-right thuggery. If you target people because of the colour of their skin or their faith, then that is far-right, and I'm prepared to say so.
Starmer says the rioters are far-right thugs, bigots who were waiting for an excuse to attack Muslims and immigrants, and they got their excuse last week. Last Monday, a 17-year-old boy went on a rampage in the town of Southport. He stabbed multiple children at a dance studio. 3 young girls were killed. 8 other children and 2 adults are in hospital. It was a brutal attack. The suspect was arrested at the scene of the crime, and since he was a minor, his identity was initially withheld. But rumors about the attacker's identity spread online. A large number of people believed that he was a Muslim immigrant, and that was the excuse that they were looking for. A riot started in Southport last Tuesday when a vigil for the slain children was taking place. Hundreds of people from out of town decided to attack a mosque in Southport. Then the riot started spreading. The British government warned people against believing the misinformation. A judge even made the minor suspect's identity public. The attacker is Axel Ruda Kubana. He's a British citizen born in Wales to Rwandan parents. The British police say that he has no known links to Islam, but none of this mattered to the rioters. They were out for blood. The riot spread to Manchester and Hartlepool on Wednesday, Sunderland and Liverpool on Friday, Blackpool, Bolton and Belfast on Saturday. And then yesterday, we saw this: mobs attacking 2 Holiday Inn Express hotels, one in Rotherham and another in Tamworth. Now, these hotels were targeted for a reason. They're being used to house asylum seekers. These are refugees who escaped their home countries, somehow made it to the UK and are looking for a new beginning. Their asylum requests are still being processed. Some of them will have genuine cases and they will be allowed to take refuge. The others will be rejected. That's how asylum requests usually go. But it seems the rioters do not want any of them. No matter their story, the rioters want all the refugees out, so they attacked these hotels. What does all of this tell you? There are a number of people in Britain who hate immigrants and a number of people who hate Islam. Muslim immigrants are hated twice as much. It's so bad that a stabbing by a British citizen of Rwandan descent has led to anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant riots across the country. Think about the number of riots and their geographical spread. It can't be the same people traveling cross-country to incite violence. This means that anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant rioters are everywhere. They lurk in every corner of the UK, waiting for an excuse to burn a mosque or a hotel housing refugees. Now, does this sound like a secular, liberal, holier-than-thou Western nation to you? Does this sound like some pinnacle of humanity and civilization? Or does this sound like a bigoted place, a place where minorities are under threat, where some outsiders are unwelcome, and where multiculturalism is met with violence? The West loves to talk about inclusivity. It loves to preach humanity and tolerance and all that jazz, but scratch the surface, and the same rot lies underneath. Our last story tonight is about Cindy Ngamba. She is a 25-year-old boxer. On Sunday, she defeated France's Davina Michel at an Olympic boxing quarterfinal. It was a fierce bout and it has secured Ngamba an Olympic medal. Now, this may not seem like big news, but Ngamba has made history because she is not representing a country at the Olympics. Ngamba is competing as part of the Refugee Olympic team, and she has won the team its first ever Olympic medal. So what is the Refugee Olympic team and why does Ngamba's win matter? Here's our report.
Have you ever watched an Olympic game? What do you usually see? Obviously the players and their extraordinary sporting skills, but also a grand display of national pride. You see a collage of different flags, cheering crowds wearing their country's colours and national anthems playing for every gold medal winner. But on Sunday, when boxer Cindy Ngamba beat France's Davina Michel at the Olympic boxing women's middleweight quarterfinal, no country's flag was waved. Instead, Ngamba held up her vest and pointed to the crest on it, which said Refugee Olympic Team. Ngamba was born in Cameroon, a country in Central Africa. She moved to the UK when she was 11 years old. She took up boxing when she was 15 and quickly became a world-class prospect. At the age of 18, she came out as gay, meaning if she returned to Cameroon, she could be sent to prison because homosexuality is banned in the country. So Ngamba chose to stay back in the UK. She continues to live in the country as a refugee. She signs papers every week to fight for this protected status. She has endured arrests. She has been taken to detention camps in the UK. Yet Ngamba has refused to give up boxing. But when she wanted to compete in the Olympics, the problem was obvious. She couldn't have represented the UK. She couldn't have represented Cameroon either. So she decided to compete as a refugee. She joined the Refugee Olympic Team. With her recent win, Ngamba has guaranteed herself an Olympic bronze medal, and she has created history by winning the Refugee Olympic Team's first ever medal. The team was born ahead of the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics. The International Olympics Committee created it as a symbol of hope for displaced athletes and migrants to participate in the Olympics. These athletes speak different languages. They come from different parts of the world. They have different awe-inspiring stories, but they compete under the same flag. And today, this flag is flying high with pride. Because Ngamba's win is also a win for those who came before her, like swimmer Yusra Mardini. She fled Syria during the civil war. She was smuggled into Europe on a boat with 18 other people. During the near-death journey, the boat's motor failed, so Mardini swam for hours in the ocean, all the while pulling the boat to safety as well. Eventually, she made it to Germany, where she joined the very first refugee team to become an Olympic athlete. Then there's track athlete Yik Purbil. He fled the civil war in Sudan, he ran away to save his life, and honed that skill at the 2016 Olympics. Similarly, Maniza Talash escaped Afghanistan's Taliban rule, and this year she's competing in Olympic breakdancing. The Refugee Olympic team started with 10 athletes. This year the number has nearly quadrupled to 37. Its members have escaped some of life's worst atrocities. For them, the journey to the Paris Olympics is a victory in itself. So, Ngamba's win only makes this even sweeter.
Not many light-hearted moments today, but let's end on a funny note. What do you think every politician needs? Every expert will tell you different things, but one quality is constant, and that is communication skills. You must explain complicated things to your voters. You must break it down for them. Or if you're Kamala Harris, confuse them. That's right. We've been listening to some of her speeches, and explainers are not really her thing. So tonight we are bringing you Kamala GPT, our very own AI experiment, where the US Vice President answers questions like, what is inflation? How important is diplomacy? And how crucial is time management? Be ready to be dazzled by the power of AI.
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house. It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud that exists above us.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy. Talk about our children. I know for this group, we all believe that when we talk about the children of the community, they are the children of the community. That bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thousands gather across Venezuela to protest against President Nicolas Maduro's election victory. Farmers in Thailand race water buffaloes to kick off the rice cultivation season. And both dogs and humans escape the heat at a Spanish canine water park. Finally, we're taking you back in history on this day in 1963. The US, Soviet Union and the UK signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. It banned the testing of nukes anywhere except underground. The idea was to contain radioactive fallout from testing. In 2023, Russia withdrew from the treaty. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity. One tree for Mother Earth. One tree for a future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
Start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital.